everyone and try and get a perspective of how different people are feeling. So the school have their angle, and they have their policies in place, and they have their definition of bullying, which is a persistent and consistent forms of abuse by the same person on the same person. And then you might speak to people that are being bullied. I moved my children moved schools because one of my daughters was suffering terribly, but what hers was a group of people, and it was inconsistent people, different days, so the school never classed it as a bullying issue, but her confidence was through the floor. She really wasn't coping very well at all, and so it's trying to see where the schools are at. Parents are going into schools and they are obviously defensive of their children, the school are defensive of their position, and often when you're going in to talk to schools about it, when we spoke to parents, is that there's just a clash, because they're coming from completely different angles and they're both very defensive of their own position. So it's trying to find a middle ground between what the schools can do as well, because they're obviously bound by legislation, and just finding some sort of middle ground that you can then actually work on, because at the moment it's not working. There doesn't seem to be a place where everyone's working from effectively.
The workshops that we've designed for children so that they can have the independence to realise what they're doing isn't right, and for those who are bullied, so they can have the confidence to stand up and become more assertive. So that's the workshops that we've designed, and that's what they're for. We worked with local police officer Gemma Berry, and she's kind of taken us around the schools, spoken to the schools in the south of the island, and we've had meetings with them, and we've kind of worked with schools we want to work with schools to cater for the schools individually, because every school is individual as well.
When you're talking about workshops for the bullies and the bullied, they're obviously very different groups of people. How do you tackle those? Because it couldn't be in the same way, surely. The workshops that we have, they're designed so that we tackle all that information in one. And, you know, if there is a child who's bullied by another child, obviously we couldn't put those children together into that workshop. So rather than, you know, sitting down with kids and teaching them about the facts of bullying, we're sitting down, we're doing fun activities with them. We're trying to make them empathetic. We're trying to empower them. We're also trying to make them think about empathy. And so, you know, we're not just going in, doing a talk. We're actually getting involved with them and talk about all aspects of bullying at the same time, and getting them to think about their actions. So the activities we've devised, for instance, off the top of my head, we've got the toothpaste activity. That's a good one. So we'll get the children to squeeze toothpaste out of a tube and onto a plate, and you then ask them to try and put it back in with a cocktail stick to the tube. Can they do it? No, they can't. At that point, you can then say, right, so if you use your words to shout at someone, to say horrible things to them, you can't take them back. It's a very similar thing. So that's the kind of activities that we're going to use to try and get the message across to those children, and to hopefully open their minds a bit to what they are doing and what they're saying. Again, when it comes to social media, there's a lot of children who use social media. It's a very similar thing. Children are quick to write words online without thinking about the consequences of their actions. Again, we've got activities designed.
We get them to write a letter at the beginning of the session of all their angsts that they want to put onto Facebook or say to somebody, and then we put them to one side, and then we do our activities, and then at the end of it we ask them sort of like how they're feeling. Go get your letter, and what do you want to do with that letter now? Do you want to put that letter onto Facebook or any other social media, or do you want to rip it up? And 9 times out of 10 they don't want to say what they want to say, because Facebook, Instagram is all sort of like instant. They're not actually thinking about their actions and the consequences of what's going to happen with that, because once it's out there forever. And I don't think they quite realise that. They think, oh, because you can't find it, it's gone. But it's not gone. It's there forever.
Yeah, it just takes one screenshot, as you say.
Yeah.
I think the other thing as well is when you're saying about how do we tackle workshops differently for the two different groups, I don't think it really needs to be a different group, because if you look at studies on abuse and people that abuse people when they're older, there's a cycle of abuse, and often people that have been abused or been bullied or been the victim, they will go on to be the perpetrator. So I think to give them the broad aspect of being empathetic and being assertive, and the difference between being assertive and abusive, and having confidence without going too far. I think building up those skills, like Aileen said, with social media, I'd hate to be a kid now, but with social media, I think it's a reactive rather than a sort of proactive response. It is always an emotional response rather than a reasonable one. I think it's not just children, I think adults are doing it all the time as well. So I think the workshops really do need to cover the whole spectrum, because you're not just dealing with the here and now. You're hoping to put things in place that they can carry on, skills that will go on into the future. And although schools do have these like PHSE lessons where they are doing mindfulness and teaching confidence and things, I think when you're dealing with children that aren't in the middle ground and they have been victims of bullying, or they are for whatever reason perpetrating bullying, they need a more closer approach than just a normal lesson plan in a class. Not to say that schools aren't trying, but it just doesn't cater for everyone, especially the people at the opposite ends of the spectrum of bullying.
I'm sure many people will agree that the understanding and empathy is, of course, a really core part of tackling bullying from both sides, as you say. But of course, that's once you've got the bully or the bullied in your sights.
Yeah.
So much of the problem with bullying we hear time and time again is that people don't want to speak up about it, whether you're the bully or, as I say, the bullied. What work can be done in schools, with the police, with just talking to your children to try and find out or make them feel comfortable to talk to you about bullying?
Obviously, that's a very personal thing, and some people never feel comfortable. All you can do is talk openly with your children. That's for parents. Parents need to be as open with their children and let their children know that they can be open with them without any repercussions, because I think sometimes as a victim you can feel like it's your fault, and kids need to know that actually no, it's nothing to do with them. Children will get bullied time and time again, whether it's words, whether it's physical. There's so many different spectrums, and it will grind them down. So yeah, it's about parents making sure that they can be open and honest with their kids, and kids can be open and honest back. With schools, it's a difficult one, because children, as Emma was saying, might not feel comfortable in a school environment, but at that point the schools, if they're doing everything they can, there's not much more they can do. The parents and schools have to come together a bit more. I think that is one way to deal with children being able to be open and honest about what's happening to them.
I think that if you know your own children, and teachers tend to know the pupils in their class, if there's something a bit different about the way they're behaving and things, sort of ask questions, and sometimes recognising the issue. If it's you feel that your child is always getting into trouble, or that apparently they've done this to a child or they've done that to a child, sitting down and saying, is there an issue? Is there a reason, why they are doing that? Are they a bully? And actually, instead of thinking my child isn't a bully, maybe think they might be. People are, there's in workplace, adulthood, everywhere. There are people. There is a kind of power struggle wherever you go. So it's a case of sitting down and talking about it and recognising it and seeing what's available, like our workshops, or going into school and saying, I'm doing stuff at home. What more can we do to try and help with empathy? If they are struggling with empathy, or is there, are they struggling with their confidence in maybe their schoolwork, and that's making them feel quite low, so they're then overpowering other children. Actually look at the reasons why not only bullies may be bullying, but actually other people are being bullied. It's not a case of you're being bullied and it's your fault, but actually sometimes there are things that children do that make them stick out, which makes them more vulnerable, and it's not necessarily their fault, but there are things that can maybe be changed. We were just talking before, my daughter, she's absolutely rubbish at PE. I mean, she, bless her, she tries, but she's not great at it, and she always feels that everyone's laughing at her in PE, and they probably are. I'm going to take her word for it and say that they are, but she's just not very good at PE, and it's a case of me talking to her and saying, it's not your best subject, but you do so well in other subjects, and I'm working on her confidence in that way, rather than go, it's kind of looking at the bigger picture of what is actually going on, because part of it is the way that the children perceive it and other people are perceiving it, but also there is a bigger picture of what is going on. Are they being bullied? Or, like in my daughter's case, you're not very good at PE, you're always flinching when the ball's coming towards your face. That's kind of funny when you're 10. So and sort of seeing what is, seeing it for what it is rather than what it's always perceived as, because her perception is that everyone is laughing at her the whole way through PE, and I don't believe that is the case at all.
We've got 2 sets of workshops that we do. We've got the anti-bullying workshops, where we are obviously teaching kids about bullying, teaching kids about empathy, and teaching kids about empowering themselves. And then we've got the SMILE workshops that we run. Now, the SMILE workshops are to do with anti-anxiety and confidence sessions. So it might be because of bullying, or it might be because of a whole host of other things. So that's really catered to a whole wide variety of kids. So, if a child is being bullied, or as Emma said, if they perceive they're being bullied, because in some cases they might not be, then that workshop is designed to help them deal with the consequences of bullying, because we might not be able to stop bullying, but we can give children the tools to help them deal with bullying. We're not going to be able to stop bullying in every case. No one is going to be able to stop bullying. It's always going to be around, whether you're a child or an adult.
In terms of... Oh, sorry, go on. Sorry.
I think part of it is that we need to get to the parents as well, because parents are conceiving... I'm of the old school. I'm older than these guys. I'm of the old school. There's a very fine line between bullying and the normal pecking order. And you have the normal pecking order when they start, say, secondary school, because that's usually where it starts. But if you can't sort out the pecking order, that's when the bullying starts, because you are vulnerable. But parents have also got a responsibility for getting the children to know the difference between the right and the wrong. We had one young man who was in our SMILE club, and when he started with us, he had quite an attitude. Got better at the end, didn't he? But we found out he was 8, 9, and he was playing Grand Theft Auto. Now, whose responsibility is that? It's not the schools, it's the parents. They're not supposed to be playing that. It's not a game for him. So if you've got parents who are letting their children play a violent game, then they must take some of the responsibility of that coming into the school, into the playground, or even outside the playground. So it's not all what is happening at school. Some of it is what's happening at home as well. So it's a big thing. It's not just school's responsibility. It's a big thing.
But as you say, much like you can never stop bullying, it will always exist, because there will always be people that disagree and come from different walks of life. Ultimately, some parents will let their children do things that other people don't think are appropriate, as you say. Well, what policies in schools can be in place? Because ultimately that's when the bullies get expelled or suspended for their actions.
Well,
is the no zero tolerance?
The problem is, right, with suspension, that's where you have a problem. If a child's suspended, what are they going to do? Because if they're from a background or a home environment where, there isn't the support at home, they're going to end up on the streets, they're going to end up sitting in playing Xbox. Actually, a suspension is not necessarily a good way of dealing with it. It's really going to depend. That really depends on the individuals. There needs to be a separate facility set up for children who are bullying and severely bullying and consistently bullying, and almost a school for bullies to try and teach them.
A department.
Yeah, a department. There needs to be that, and that's the be all and end all. That is bigger than us, because that is a huge thing to try and achieve. But that is what needs to be done, because there are going to be some kids who you can't reach no matter what you do. So there needs to be, that's a long-term job, needs a lot of support.
Sometimes it makes the situation worse, doesn't it, Helen? Because we know.
Oh yeah.
We know. Well, I've had kids through secondary school. Yours is just about to start, and we know that the ones that are being the bully or not very nice, they get taken out and they go to the farm to spend the day up there. Now,
which is great.
Which is great.
Brilliant,
it gets
because
them
this
mixing.
is the other level.
It gets them mixing, but you've got the kids back at school who are still in the classroom, are the ones that have been bullied, and they're going, hang on a minute, they're going off doing something really nice. So if I can be nasty, then I can go. And it's just one chain. Yeah. So as Helen was saying, they need to stay in school. They need to be.
But there needs to be a separate.
There needs to be a separate area
for them.
But they still need to have their education.
Facility.
Not
they need their education.
The nice
not out in
no.
in town, causing havoc for everybody else.
They need to stay in school.
One of the things that we're looking at doing is doing a survey for the schools and doing a survey for the parents to kind of get a grasp of how the schools perceive bullying that's going on in their own school, and how they perceive maybe parents what responsibility they think parents have, or what issues they are actually facing in schools at the moment with regards to bullying, versus, like say, the bullying definition by the Department of Education is that it's this persistent one-on-one or a group-on-one pattern of behaviour to prove that it is an actual bullying situation, whereas the person that's being bullied, that's not necessarily how it is for them, but that doesn't mean that that's not how they feel. So we're hoping to do a survey with the schools and with parents, and we're hoping that parents from children that are bullies, children that are bullied, and children that have never been bullied and they've not had any issues, we're hoping that all parents will get involved, so we can get an understanding of how people are feeling from both sides of the spectrum, and then find a positive action that we can work towards, because what's in place isn't working, and it's difficult to have the conversations when it's a one-to-one level. If we can get a survey that does show the island's perceptions and the school's perceptions, and what do they feel that they can't suspend certain students because they know that there's nobody at home to look after them because their parents are out working, or do they feel that if they go to certain parents and say, we're having these issues with your child, are they going to have parents being really aggressive towards them? Or there could be a whole multitude of things that are going on, that until we get the true opinions of people, we're just guessing.
Yeah, the statistics are really important, because there hasn't been an island-wide kind of a study on bullying. I know there is a group that has done something with teenagers, but overall there needs to be more statistics to be able to look at, to then be able to work out more what needs to be done, because we can deal with the empathy side of things and the anxiety and confidence, but if we've got the statistics, then we can say, right, this area needs looking at, and break it down a bit more.
There will always be parents that won't stop their children from doing certain things that maybe felt inappropriate by other people, and there will always be that, and there'll always be pecking orders and things. But what we want is for our children to leave education with an education and with a sense of self that will make them productive in society going forward. That's what we want, and it's what do we need to do to improve on that.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is that actually these kids, whether they're being bullied or whether they are bullying, they're going to go into our society in a few years' time, and they are going to become, an adult. They're going to take their experiences and take it into their adult life, and that's going to shape them. So it's really important that we hit them now, and we we've designed this to
Attack the situation.
Attack the situation, yes. And we've designed this to kind of we've designed this to try and get them at the right age. And it does start. To be fair, it starts from reception upwards. It's not just the older kids. It does start from reception upwards. That's where you do want to get their attention. Obviously, with the anxiety and the confidence things, that is more for the older ones, because they're the ones who are now affected. Because we're not only dealing with trying to teach children it's wrong to bully and teach children empathy, and how to treat others. We're also dealing with the kids who have been bullied for years, who have been suffering for years, and who needed help years ago.
No, I was just thinking, because I know that people will say, boys will be boys, you have boisterous boys, or you'll have, there's always been bullying. In my day, it was dealt with this, or hit them back, and there's all those things. But we're not just dealing with children. I would not want to be a kid. I don't even say that lightly. Like, I would not want to be a child going through of that generation, of the last generation and going forwards, because you can't just go home and switch off to social media, especially if you're a teenager and you have a phone and you get messages, or people will take a picture of you in school when you're not looking, and then they'll post it and people will be ridiculed. We're not dealing with things that have been dealt with before. The whole social media and the internet generation that we have now, these are things that haven't been dealt with before, and that is why we're seeing more people with anxiety, more people with mental health issues. And I know that there's a lot of old school thinking that, well, that didn't happen in my day, and it didn't, and there's a good reason for that, because you didn't have the issues that people have today. And it's not a wishy-washy excuse. It is a fact, and it's only going to get, it's not going to go away. The internet's not going to go away, smartphones aren't going to go away, social media's not going to go away. So it's looking at how we actually deal with it, because we're starting to see consequences of children self-harm and CAMS referrals going through the roof. That's not just on the Isle of Man. We're talking probably, I don't know stats everywhere else, but we are definitely talking in the UK, I'd imagine internationally. So it's not something that's going to go away. So it's something that the government and schools and parents and society need to accept, because it's their family future that are going to be impacted.
The bullying did happen years ago, because I was.
It was just a different type.
It was just a different type of bullying. It got left on a Friday when you got on the school bus to go home, and it was picked up again on the Monday morning. At least you had the Saturday and Sunday to get over it. But I'm in my 50s, and I've met up with, we had this class reunion when I was 40, and I came face to face with my bullies, and they didn't even realise that they were bullying me. They didn't see it as bullying, but it was. And when I explained to them, but yeah, you did, and you've sort of shaped me, some of me, they sort of went, oh God, I didn't realise. But that's when you're a lot older, and I think when you've had your own kids and you've gone through that sort of thing. So yeah, it's there, and I think it's always been there. There's always been the specky kid, there's always been the fat kid, but now it's more than that. There's a lot more to it than that. There's sort of when I was a kid, sort of anorexia was something that was way out, but that's one of the things that the girls pick up on when they start getting picked on and bullied because of their size. There's a lot, and social media's got a lot to answer for as well out there in the advertising world. They've got a lot to answer for as well.
I think the problem is now professionals, parents, because it's such a new thing, social media, it's only really arisen 10 years, I think. So it is a relatively new thing. People are trying to work out what effect and impact it does actually have on children, and people still don't know really. It's only just starting to come into play, where people are realising the impact and effects that, social media and the use of electronics and, the internet and people are just starting to realise now the actual impact. And now it's kind of, whoa, what do we do? How are we going to deal with this? And it's really difficult to now take control of. And, for parents especially, it's difficult, because everyone's kids has social media. It's like, Mum, can I have Facebook? Or can I go and do this? And how, as a parent, you say no when your child could be bullied because they haven't got the same as their friends. It's a really difficult situation for parents and professionals alike. I mean, schools, to be fair, that is one policy that's brilliant that schools are starting to take on board on Ireland, because my stepson went to high school and he'd be texting from his lessons. And, now they're starting to bring, the use of mobile phones in schools. They're banning the use of mobile phones in schools. So that's a great policy that's starting to come into play. So it kind of takes that side of bullying, I guess, out of in school hours. But then, again, on the other side, I have spoken to parents of children who are bullied who say that their child who's bullied now doesn't have access to a phone to be able to ring mum, ring dad, ring someone if they are being bullied in school hours, because they can't use their phone for that kind of degree. So again, you do have more issues coming up, even though there are policies being put in place.
But we've said that's easily solved by every time they go into a class, their phone goes into a box, and when they finish the class, they take the phone out. So if they need to get in contact with somebody between lessons or lunch break, they've got their phone. But when they go into the classroom, all phones at the front in a box, and you take it back out again.
That's obviously dependent on the individual school's policy, which, again, it's all different.
See, what we have found out since starting this, there is an anti-bullying policy for schools, but the schools pick the bits that they want to use. It's not an all-round. You can't go into one school and one school will say, right, this is our anti-bullying policy. Take that and go into another one, because it'll be completely different. They pick what they want to use, so there's no flat line, this is it. It's what they feel suits them. And I think a flat line would make every school work on the same level, not rather pick your own little bit out here and there.
You were saying, Emma, that there's obviously different perceptions, isn't there, as well?
The other thing that so when I did move my children from one school to another, the police were involved at one point, and the police officer said to me, he said, you can't just move them because they need to learn to deal with it, because they're going to go to different places, and when they grow up this will happen. And I completely agreed with him. But then what I said to him is, if the school rang you and said, we have children from the same family, or we have a child that's coming in and their clothes are torn and they're saying that mum did it, or older brother did it, or someone did it, and they're saying that they're always being called names and they're being excluded from the family things, how many times would a family or would the school have to ring the police to report that family before the police knocked on the door, from a safeguarding point of view? And actually the school have a safeguarding responsibility to safeguard the children that are in their care, maybe by other children that are in their care. And I think that when they're looking at the policy for bullying, they need to look at it with a safeguarding mind on a little bit, because that isn't always happening. This where it has to be a persistent thing by one person, it has to be over a certain length of time. If it was abuse within the home, the school wouldn't let it go on for as long as they let it go on in schools. And I think that they need to have a safeguarding head on when they're looking at each case that's coming before them, and even in their policy writing, the department need to be thinking of that as well.